Hi, everybody. This is a recording of a shir that I gave last Shabbos Pas Shmini. Um, it was one of those very difficult shiurim because it was the subject was actually what to do and how I felt when ethics was confronted by halacha or halacha was confronted by ethics. Let me maybe start telling the story. What happened by me on Shvi Shel Pesach? It was Shabbos. And a worker, fell on my balcony, and he fell. He was actually probably straight dead as he fell from a very high um, floor. Was on the seventh floor, and the question, the halachic question that, of course, was here relevant was what to do with making a phone call to call the emergency, the police, etc., to deal with the dead body. So the ethical thing to do, according to me, and this is more a human ethics, it's of course to call. That's a basic humanity, the basic Menschlichkeit, as somebody said during the shir. On the other hand, the halacha is also quite clear or not clear, and as we shall see. But in any case, the halacha, when I called afterwards, Rav Sherki, he also told me that the only way to do it is to do it b'shinui, or to ask another Gentile person to do it for you. So we are here facing a problem. Not to call is not ethical. To call is not halachic, unless, of course, you have this special rule that you can do it b'shinui. And so I wanted to discuss that, and would like to take that a step further. It's, as somebody said, it's quite a daring shir that I gave, but it comes from the heart, and it's, of course, everybody lives that situation in a different way, and it's very personal. So it has nothing to do with the objective way of thinking. It's a very personal way of thinking, and so therefore this is what I would like to share with you today. The idea that the halachic point of whether or not to call is, of course, a subject that a person has to ask his Rov. I am not a Rov, and so therefore I'm not going to let myself go into a psak halacha. On the one hand. On the other hand, it gives me, of course, also the freedom to speak about my personal opinions and my personal thoughts without having to be responsible for the consequences in an halachic perspective. Clearly, the Mishnah Berurah, and I'm not going to give you here all the sources. This is something that you can check. But the Mishnah Berurah is very, very clearly says that, for example, a doctor is not allowed to be Mechal Shabbos to save a Gentile, in the sense that he's not allowed to be over an Isur, especially not the Reise. And that we need to understand, of course, but in any case, that's what he clearly says. And on this, the Reb Moshe Feinstein says that it's a Dovo Borur, and he actually mentions the Mishnah Berurah. It's in Orach Chaim Chelik Dalet Siman Ein Tes, where he mentions the Mishnah Berurah, and he says that it is very difficult to understand him, as if you would not do that, that would create a lot of problems to Klal Yisrael, to the person himself, but also to Klal Yisrael in general. If it comes out on the news that this has happened, and it is because of the Shabbos that another human being actually did not make it, he would be considered a murder or an accessory to a murder, whatever it is. But in any case, it would create a lot of problem, a lot of sin. So it's called Mishum Evo, and we will discuss that a little bit later in the shir. But in any case, Reb Moshe Feinstein is quite strongly opposed to not doing it, but he says a doctor has an obligation to actually do whatever he can to save his patients, even on Shabbos, independently of who they are. And this is Mishum Evo, in order to avoid having sin from the going towards us. Now, for me, of course, that's quite okay, and I can of course live with that. But it means, in other words, that Mishum Evo is really only b'diavad. So it's much as I understand when you're reading here, it's because of a sakona. If there would be no sakona, then there is unfortunately no way that we can be mechal Shabbos for a Gentile, and that's something that that needs to be understood in today's world. And everybody understands, or at least I understand, that this is creating a tension by me, is how to consolidate those two things together. So when I asked Rav Cherki, how can it be that when the halacha is confronted with ethics, it doesn't, for example, say Rav Kook, and this was I heard from Rav Moshe Irom, that where Rav Kook says very clearly that the halacha, the Torah, has to be ethical. If there is a problem of ethics, then it means that we have misunderstood the Torah, or we've misunderstood the halacha. So in other words, the Torah is fully ethical and is to be also understood like that. Now I can say, probably I have not seen the Rav Kook inside, but I can say that the basis for that Rav Kook, I'm guessing, is the Rocheo Darkei Noam u'Nesivuseo Sholem. So this is the main idea. When the Goyim will see that, of course, it will bring them. It will be able to teach them, and they will be accepting these halachas automatically, because they are beautiful and they bring to peace, etc. This type of halacha, of course, is challenging that perspective, and so therefore I would like to continue a little bit further and taking even more daring steps, but it is an important element that is required for the understanding here. So Rav Cherki told me basically that yes, it's true. That's what Rav Kook probably said, but he said it only a Sanhedrin that can change something. So he very quickly understood from my question that if there is a problem, that means that something needs to be changed. I actually, to be honest, when I asked him, it was more an element of if it is going against the ethics, that means that the halacha is maybe wrong in the sense of our understanding of the halacha. But what he says, no, the halacha is indeed in this case wrong, temporary wrong, and therefore we need the Sanhedrin to change it. We did not continue speaking. He didn't have a lot of time, but in any case, the way that I understand him, or maybe that's not what he meant, but it is something which I've mentioned in multiple times. The Rambam actually himself in Hilchos Mamre, I don't know exactly where in Hilchos Mamre, but when he indeed when he speaks about the Zoken Mamre, he actually describes that. He says that a Bezdin that wants to change an halacha can change an halacha even if he is not as big as the previous Bezdin that has come up with this halacha. So normally for takonos and gezeros that the Chazal are creating, you need to have a second Bezdin, which is Godel B'Chochma V'Minyan, it's called. They have to be bigger, or at least as big as the previous generation of the previous Bezdin that has created the halacha. But when it comes to a logical deduction from a text, which is be'etzem d'oraisa, when it comes to the oraises that are learned from the limudim she'atorah nidreshes, from the midos she'atorah nidreshes, those halachas, they can be argued by the new Bezdin. So even a Bezdin of today, theoretically, could change an halacha and could say that something, a klal uprat to klal, for example, is not logical, and therefore we're going to change it to a klal uprat. Or that this gzera shova may be not a gzera shova, but this kal v'chomer is different, and therefore we we believe today the Kal V'cholim is not valid anymore, and we will learn something else. Or this is not mufne, as in some Gemaras. So basically, there are multiple ways that the new Bezdin of today could argue with a Bezdin, even a Bezdin from Moshe Rabbeinu. So basically, he's quite strong in that. He's very consistent in that also in the Sefer HaMitzvos, in the Shroshim, and also in Hilchos Mamrim, and also in the Hagdome to Perush HaMishnayos. So there is a lot of places where he says the same thing, basically, that the Divrei Soifrim, which are the Reises that we learn from the Yud Gimel Shater and Nidreshes Ben, can be changed by a new Bezdin, even if the Bezdin can be a Bezdin of today, which is definitively not anymore as big as the big Bezdin that existed in the time of the Tanoim, even in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, and therefore but they still can change them. The Or Sameach is pointing the point, is making the point there on the spot to say that that indeed the Bezdin does not even have to be as big, even if it's a cotton, and he's very much explains it indeed how he uses that halacha to explain indeed how a Zukan Mamre can exist. And I'm not going to go into that, but the Or Sameach is very clear of what I just said to you. So in the Rambam himself, you can a little bit argue, maybe he didn't mean it that way, but the Or Sameach is very clear. He says that the Bezdin can be a cotton Bezdin, even a smaller Bezdin, and a smaller in Chochmah and Minyan, and still argue with the previous Bezdin. So the question that I always had was, that's very nice, and it gives a better understanding, a classification of all the different levels of the Reises and the Rabbonons. But the main question that I had was, why would the Bezdin do that? So why would the Bezdin change? What is the purpose of that change? Now, I gave an example. So the ideal understanding is if you can find in Shas a place where the new Bezdin changed something from a previous generation. And we learned it in Shabbos, Mesechus Shabbos, Daf Samach Daled Amud Beis. And there it says, Kedetanya, V'hadovo benidoso. So there's a posuk and there is a word expression, V'hadovo benidoso. זקנים וראשונים אמרו שלא תיקחוי ולא תפקויז ולא תסקשת בבגדי צבעונים עד שבו רב עקיבא ולימד, ואם כן אתו מגנה על בעלו ונמצא בעלו מגרשו, אלא מה תלמוד לא אמר והדובר בנידוסו, בנידוסו תהיה עד שתבואי במים. So, just translated in English, there is a limud where the Zekanim or Rishonim, so the previous generations, the big Zekanim, they learned that a woman which is a nidder should not wear makeup, should not go with clothes which are beautiful clothes to make herself attractive. And that was we learned it from a posuk. So it's a Isur Doraisa to wear these type of clothes. And when Rabbi Akiva saw that actually you are megane the issue al balo, that there is a problem in the way that husband used to starting to look at the women. In other words, society has changed, and the way that we look at women and the way that women want to be looked at in the sense of equality and values, etc., did not match anymore. And this would become a big problem as people would start to divorce and would create problems by Nishla Ishto. And so he changed the halachos, he stopped that, he canceled that din doraisa, and he changed it, and he said, no, from here we're going to learn that the niddah has to go to the mikveh, which means, in other words, that the main discussion is, what does it mean? Does it mean that the previous generations did not have a mikveh for niddah chas v'sholem? This is only a challenge in this Gemara. There are other places where the Gemara learns also that niddah has to go to the mikveh. I think, if I remember correctly, there is a Tosfos that actually brings down, I think, 3 places in Shas where we learn that niddah has to go to the mikveh. But that's a side point. But here the main idea is that you see here Rabbi Akiva seeing that there is an issue with a certain halacha, and therefore the halacha has to change. And so where there was an isur doraisa, it became a mutter doraisa, and even the rabbonon, and a new halacha has been put instead from the same words. So this could be, personally, I believe could be a very good example of a change that happens from one Sanhedrin to the next Sanhedrin in the next generations. Now, as a side note, but it's not really a side note, it is really the point that I wanted to make as we are today in the Sfiras HaOmer. A lot of times you hear children singing, "V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha," so Omar Rabbi Akiva, "V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha." And there is a question that you can ask, of course, is why do we say it under Omar Rabbi Akiva? It is a posuk in Parshas Kedoshim, "V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha." You should say Omar Ribono shel Olam, or maybe Omar Moshe Rabbeinu, but not Omar Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva did not add anything to this posuk. The only thing that he added was Ze Klal Godel Batoir. And a lot of people think that Ze Klal Godel Batoir means Mitzvah Gedoyle Batoir, but it's not what he said. He said Ze Klal Godel Batoir. A klal is a kind of a midah. It's a way that you have to think. A klal normally is something that you give to people who think, and you give them a klal so that they know from the klal what are the protein. And so basically it is a tool that you give to thinkers, if you want, to philosophers or people who create laws. And basically it's a klal that he gives to the Bezdin. Whatever you do, when you paskin, always have this in mind. The Rav to Rach Komer, this should be your guiding principles in your, or when you create halachas, or when you paskin halacha in a particular case. And so therefore Rabbi Akiva is Ilishitoso. Rabbi Akiva is going very consistently with his own principle when he sees that a certain halacha creates a big problem. And for the people, the V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha is a klal godel, and therefore he uses that klal in order to actually change the halacha. It's a bit daring what I say, I know that, but it's basically the way that I'm reading it. And again, this is a personal shir. It is the way that I see it. And of course, I leave everybody to disagree with me. In the contrary, I would love to hear some disagreement and to have a interesting discussion. And I'm even open to change my mind. So basically, what the outcome from here, and together with the Rambam and with a case like Rabbi Akiva, we see that when there is indeed a change in ethics in a new society, where a certain halacha cannot be anymore matching with the viewpoint, what is called in German, the Weltanschauung of the people today, that this is not menschlich anymore, then the halacha, if can be changed, it should be changed according to the Rambam. Of course, the question is, if that's the case, why don't we change today a lot of halachas? Why do we keep so much to the original halachas? The Kesef Mishneh on the spot asked kind of this question, if you want, but what he says is that since the Mishneh was Mesuter, since the Gemara was Ukva, that it was Nechtam, he calls it, when it was already finalized, the Gemara, and it was probably written as well, we took upon ourselves, Klal Yisrael, it must have taken upon themselves not to argue anymore on the Mishnah, not to argue anymore on the Gemara, but to base everything that we are doing today in Halacha is actually based on the Gemara or on the Mishnah. So basically we stopped that flow of changing that could occur generation after generation got stopped from the moment that the Gemara was nechtam, was sealed and written down. Now, he is also not very clear himself. He doesn't have a proof for that, but he assumes it. It seems to him that this must be the case in order to still align with the Rambam. Now, I'm not saying that the Rambam here is unanimously approved by all the Rishonim, this point of view. There is a lot of Ma'amar Chazal that argue on the Rambam, that clearly says that everything, all the Mishnah was written, Halacha Moshe Sinai was given to us from Sinai, etc., etc. There is a lot of Ma'amar Chazal that argue with the Rambam, but this is, I'm just interesting. This is what the Rambam actually writes. Now, having said that, since today we cannot change anymore the halachas, And so even halachas that have a problem of ethical nature has to remain the same. So how do we deal with that in today's world? And how do we deal with that also even in the time of Chazal? And so what we have received is some tools that allows us to change halacha. Now, we're not changing halacha, but we are just changing the difference between, we have introduced what my good friend Omer Schneider said, as the way that he describes it, is you have halacha, and then you have halacha lema'aseh. And these are two separate things. Give an example, a very good example, which has nothing to do with this, but is the concept of Eis Lasus Lashem. Eis Lasus Lashem is indeed a concept that allows us to go against the halacha. There's an halacha that you're not allowed to write Torah Shebal Peh, but we are writing. Not only are we writing, it's even a mitzvah. It's a rabbanon. Our sages that teach us that we should write it down today, especially since people forget. And the Or Chidushe Torah that we have, we should start writing them down. And so the idea is that the halacha remains. It's not that the halacha changed, but it is an Eis Lasus Lashem. Halacha Lema'aseh changed. So there is an halacha you're not allowed to write. This did not change, but the Eis Lasus Lashem has created a new attribute, if you want, that enables us to write it, and not even enables us, it forces us to start. Ethics that have to do with ethics. For example, you have the Gemara brings Koved Abrios is a very good example where you're allowed to be oiv and isu daraisa for Koved Abrios. There is another example is Mishum Darke Sholem is also a very good example, or Mishum Evo. These are all tools that we received, but of course it has to be done by Chazal. Only Rabbonim, an individual cannot use that as a tool where he can paskin himself. Well, I believe that this is Mishum Evo, I believe this is Darke Sholem. Normally you leave it to the Rabbonim, the Gedolim, the Rabbonim, the Poskim, to actually decide of whether that particular case falls within the category of Mishum Evo. But what you see here is that we have fixed the halacha, but what we did is we have fixed it between brackets to match with our society, Mishum Evo or Mipnei Darke Sholem or Mishum Koved Abrios. These are tools that enables us to adapt to the current circumstances, to the current situations in which the Klal Yisrael is. Now, Rabusha Weiss, actually, he has a very nice, I found the website on his website, I think there is a website from him, minchasasher.com, where he gives a shiur, where the shiur goes about Darke Sholem versus Evo. He is trying to identify whether there is a difference between Darke Sholem or Mishum Evo. Is there any difference between those two? And actually, he is discussing another point, which is a very, very interesting point. That's why I looked for him. Actually, I was going to call him because I understood that this is something which he is rather busy with. But he also speaks about the element of whether it is a chiyuv or it is just a heter. In other words, is hutro or hutro. So it's the dichui or it is a heter. In other words, does it mean that Darke Sholem, do we have to go according to Darke Sholem, or is it only like, for example, if you believe that if you want to do it because of Darke Sholem, the Chazal allow you to do it. But lekatchila, if you want to be from, you want to be Yiras Shamayim, then you don't do the Isu. Or no, there is an element of really particularly going into the union of Darke Sholem, or the union of Koved Abrios and etc. So he brings down, he wants to say that this is a machloikes between the Rambam and the Tur, and he brings down from the Loshen from the Rambam that actually there is a tzivui that a person has to actually go and do Darke Sholem. So it is not just a bedievet, a heter, but he wants to say that it is actually a tzivui, a chiyuv for a person to go and try to save whatever it is, or to give back an aveda, or to go and visit an aveda. It is the idea behind that is the darke. It brings down the Rambam at the end. Hare nemar mipnei darke sholem. He says Hare nemar toiv Hashem lakol v'rachamov al kol ma'asov v'nema derocheo darke noim b'chol nesiv v'ser sholem. So here the Rambam has a very interesting. He brings on a posuk from himself, which he understood, where the posuk where we can take it from, and therefore he says. Tzivur Chachom, I will read you inside. It's the Rambam in Hilchos Melochim, Perek Yud, Halacha Yud Beis. So he says, Afilu ho'akum, Tzivur Chachomim l'vaku choleim. There's a tzivui that to go and visit, how do you call it, unwell people who are sick, to visit the sick. Velikfor mesem imese Israel, to bury them as well. Ulefarnis aniyem bechlal aniye Israel. So if you're giving tzedakah, and a guy also wants needs tzedakah, then you have to give him to him. He calls him Yerkedach Kishol. So there he starts to give philosophical ideas. So it's not only an element of Mishum Evo, which would be more an apologetic, that be'etzem you should not do that, but since there is Evo, there is a danger for Klal Yisrael, we have no choice and we have to give it. No, he gives a positive element. He gives a positive explanation. He says, Toiv Hashem lakol v'rachamov al kol ma'asov. And that's something which is a very Kabbalistic be'etzem. The Arizal also, and the Ramak, specifically the Ramak in Historia Medvoira, is also very much focused on that. V'nemar derocheo dachinoyam v'chol nesiv v'ser sholem. And here, this posuk is extremely important, because this posuk shows you that the Torah, by definition, has to be ethical. It has to be, because that's what it says in the posuk. Derocheo darke noyam. So if the posuk says that, it's an edus. It's a testimony that the Torah is the Rocheo, has to be Darkei Noyam, V'chol Nesiv V'ser Sholem. So when we have a problem, then according to the Rambam, it means that no, we have to review that. There is a problem, and therefore we have to. Therefore, the Chachomim helped us, and they told us that you have to indeed look after the Goyim as well. You can, of course, argue with that whole principle, and you can say that no, that it's not because you have an ethical problem, therefore there is an ethical problem. This is very personal. Plus also, if we would only follow what we think is ethical, then you end up like Immanuel Kant. And then why do you need the Torah to teach you what is ethical and not? Because the whole idea that we always explained them before was also that a person wants to do good, but on the other hand, he cannot know by himself what is good and what is bad. And this is the whole idea of the thinkers, the philosophers like Immanuel Kant, who believe, no, we human beings, we are capable ourselves to define what is good and what is bad, and therefore it ends up to Nazi Germany. But the idea is that we have to accept that the Torah's ethic is the real ethic. And so therefore, the personal problems that you might have to suppress and believe that the ethics, although you don't understand, but it is not for you to understand. There is a higher divine understanding of what is ethics and what not. And in this particular case, you indeed have to suppress your own feelings and your own ideology and understanding of what is ethical and not, and you have to follow what the Halacha tells you to do, which is a normal answer which people should be giving. Of course, you can also be apologetic in the Halacha itself, and you can try to explain why this Halacha is ethical. And then you can use the tools that we have, the yeshivish tools, where you can start digging deep down into the halacha and deep down into the ethics and prove that the halacha is still matching the ethics. But that's an exercise that you can do. What I want to say here is that according to the Rambam, it doesn't say that. So he kinds of claims that the Chachomim were still mitzvah to be mevaka cholim and to be mefarnes anim, although that there is a clear halacha also that does not allow that. And so here we have this tension between the halacha and the Halacha L'Maaseh. So thanks to Omer again, we can now explain. Yes, there is an Halacha, and then there is Halacha L'Maaseh. Now, if you want, the way that I see that is a little bit. I would like to go a little bit further, because the main question that you can ask is the Torah, is there a Torah, and we have the Rocheo Dachenoyam B'chol Nesivoseo Sholom as guidelines to understand the Torah, and that you would indeed then, like Rav Sherki told me, you would need a Sanhedrin to adapt, because in our society that is not anymore Nesivoseo Sholom, it's not anymore Dachenoyam, it's not does not show the Toiv Hashem Lakol Rachmo V'Kol Ma'asov in the current understanding of the world. Or is actually the Toiv Hashem Lakol Rachmo V'Kol Ma'asov and the Rocheo Dachenoyam B'chol Nesivoseo Sholom, is it actually the foundation of the Torah? And that's a little bit the way I would like to go, by using this famous expression, which is taken out of a Chazal and rephrased it, is Derech Eretz Kodmo LaTorah. In other words, the idea is that the Derech Eretz, Menschlichkeit, to be a mensch, is first, and the Torah gives you extra dimension. But what Hashem wants from you in the first place is to be a mensch, and then you have the halachas to make sure that you keep being a mensch, because you believe not because you personally is to be a mensch is also always good. And so in order to do tikkun olam and not to do a churban olam, you need a Torah to teach you what it is. And so therefore you have the halacha to teach you what it is, and therefore the halacha, indeed, if it's a problem, then you need to go together with the Sanhedrin, as the Netziv explains, that once the idea of the Yovel is actually so that Rabbonim have enough time to investigate the issues and to actually think about whether the current world, as I said, the Weltanschauung, the worldview of the current generation is the same as the previous 50 years, and then eventually to adapt. He even says something which is a tremendous chiddush, that the Midrash HaTorah Nidreshes, from which the Rambam says those are Halacha L'Moshe Sinai, he says that no, they are not Halacha L'Moshe Sinai, and every generation has to review them to see whether or not they are still valid or not. My main point of view is that it is the ethics that would probably be at the center of this thought. This, how do you look at the world, and what are the midas actually teaching us? So that's a little bit the basis of what I want to say. Again, the halacha is clear. When you ask the halacha, before you do something and you have time to ask, you should ask the halacha. The main point that to finish off, and that's something which is again very, very personal, and it's not here something that I want to teach to the people, but even if it is only making you think and start to, if you can start with a debate and building up strong foundations for the Torah, it would already be worth it. But for me personally, when a person makes an act that comes out from his heart, then it's eventually similar to what we can call a kanos, what Pinchas did. In other words, when you have this concept, you have like similar, like you have halacha, and therefore you have halacha l'maaseh. So that's one way of doing it. The other way is then you have also sometimes things that come out of your heart, and even if Pinchas would have asked the Rabbonim, they would have told him he's not allowed to do that. But when you do it purely out of menschlichkeit, of what comes out from this purity of your heart, but of course you have to know that it is pure. If it comes out from a purity from your heart, that you believe that this is an ethical thing to do, then this is kind of goes into the element of kanos. Now, of course, like I said, who knows today what is pure and what is out of your heart? As somebody asked me, maybe by me, the feeling that I had towards this unfortunate case, this accident, this person that was lying dead, which I saw as a Tselem Elokim lying on my on the roof in front of me. Maybe the way that I felt and the way that I was wanting to um, to act was not a sign of humanity, of humanism, but maybe it was a sign of weakness. And that's true. It's a valid point. It could be that it is purely a weakness. Some would call it it's the attitude of a Golosid who does not proud of himself and he needs to continuously appease the goyim energetically towards the goyim. I certainly have this as well in me. I don't I think that it's probably true, but in any case, it was a very valid point, which also has to be taken into account in my case. But again, I want to end up saying the halacha is to be asked to a rov, and the only thing that I'm giving here is the a framework in which one can understand if the ethics clearly is against the halacha, we have the tools to change. We have the tools which is in either we can change the halacha in itself. Of course, we cannot change what is written, but the Torah Sheba'al Peh can be changed. Big parts of the Torah Sheba'al Peh, all the parts which are logical, which have been deducted from a text, which are used the Yud Gimel Midrash HaTorah Nidreshes, they can be changed, and they are not changed anymore. But therefore, we have the other tools which are Dorchei Dachei, in other words, Darkei Sholem. We have Eis Lases Lashem. We have Koved Abrios. We have Mishum Evo. We also have Mishum Chilul Hashem. All these elements are helping us in adapting eventually to the society, to the environment, to the context in which we are living. And then we have said that to understand those elements is either to be seen as a derech eret kodmo la Torah. So this is the foundations of the Torah, and therefore they are breaking the halacha. So it is it's not a hutro, but it's a so it's be'etzem is completely hutro. Be'etzem it's completely mutter, and it's even a chiyuv to do it, as to be a mensch first. Those tools, mishum evo and darkei sholem. On the other hand, I have introduced to you two ways to see it. Either it is halacha, and then you have halacha lemase, or it is kind of you have the halacha, how the chachomim are paskening, and then you have kind of a kanos, things that when you do, that it's been regarded as something good by Hashem. But if he would have asked, then not. So basically, that's the point of view. Now, chas v'sholom, I'm not a rov, so I cannot pasken, and everything I say is completely personal and should not be seen as to be taken further. But it's just like I said, this is lagdil Torah to be magdil the Torah and to make it beautiful. So basically, I'm trying just to add my little contribution to a Torah-dikke thought, and to maybe help, if it can help further, then this would be a schus for myself. Maybe we take zoiche to the Geula Shlema and to the Sanhedrin, so that we can today review and understand and appreciate the ethics of the Torah. May Hashem grant us the understanding that the Torah, everything that is in the Torah, is to the most and the highest ethics as can be. May we zorgen to the Geula Shlema, mehr of Yomeinu, Amen.